Welcome to Just Start, Get Visible, your go-to resource of the journey to becoming more visible in a way that feels right for you. Hey there. Welcome back to yet another episode of Just Start, Get Visible. It's Jacqueline here, and I am thoroughly looking forward to today's conversation. We're talking all about finding your voice throughout this entire month, and I can't think of a better person to kick off this conversation because, as you know, we have a detailed conversation at the top of the month, and then you get all of me for the rest of the month as we go deeper to providing you with some tools and some frameworks and some opportunities for you to really, for this month, find your voice. And the reason why I'm thrilled about this particular conversation is because I actually, for the first time today, just met this person. Like normally, when I have a guest on the podcast, we have met in real life, like person to person, skin to skin. And however, we had a pre-conversation virtually, but this is the first time that we're meeting in real life. And so it's a lot of stuff that I'm going to learn for the very first time today. So with that, Kat Calvin.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
I am as well. I did some, I'll say, discovery into your world. Okay. When I say research, digging, like people get weird, you know.
I mean, I'm a lawyer, so you say discovery, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she read my emails.
That's right, you are an attorney.
Immediately, I'm like, did she hack into my voicemails? What's happening?
I didn't do it. Discovery's not the word. It's not the word I want to go for at all. I did some exploratory,
deep Googling.
Positive Googling, okay, and other, search engines. But to be quite frank with you, and I knew a bit of this before we joined or before I did the intentional discovery on you, right? I knew about how intentional you are in the spaces that you're in, just from our pre-conversation. But of course, because I knew we were going to have this dialogue, I had to go a little bit deeper. And I was impressed by a lot of things, right? I can't help but see the many stops that you've made in very intentional spaces, right? You've made a stop at the Karsh Institute, Democracy. You made a stop at Spread the Vote, specifically as a founder. You made a stop as the council member at the William and Flora Hewitt Foundation, National Civic League as a senior advisor. You're a co-founder and still are of a wonderful organization called Project ID, right? You are firmly in the philanthropic space in so many ways, hugely rooted in democracy, right? I'll throw out the word equality. We can get there in a second, if you feel strongly about that word. But I've just been so impressed with the spaces you've been in because they all have so much similarity. It hasn't been like I'm going to do a little here and do a little there. Your work has a really nice through line that I can see. But it makes me want to ask you, is this what you thought you'd be doing?
Well, it's funny that you asked that because I'm in the middle of a huge sort of life and career transition. So I have no idea what I'm doing. Mostly just golfing at the moment, sewing, having late night cocktails as I contemplate, the next Keanu Reeves movie.
Life. I contemplate life.
But I come from a long line of civil rights activists. I was very much in service members and was very much raised to, I could do whatever I wanted, but it has to serve the Black community and the country. And so in that, yes, how it actually panned out, being focused on IDs and I'm doing things in the democracy space and sort of in human rights and whatever, that was a surprise. Mm-hmm. But sort of the larger arc of my life, like I was always going to end up being some sort of activist. It's just how I was brainwashed as a child.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take the word brainwash. I'll also take the word influenced, right?
Yeah.
Your path sort of kind of reminds me, we were talking about this before we came on, before Troy said, take one, right? It reminds me of my dear friend Cassie Williams, who's the head of literacy for Detroit Public Schools, which is where I'm from. She comes from a long line of people that do the work, right? And so it's almost like, of course, she's going to do the work in that way. And it just reminds me of that. When you said Project ID, though, or you said ID work, I want to make sure our audience is clear about what that is. So tell me a little bit about your work in the ID space, but more importantly, why that's so important to you.
Sure. So I ran until March. I founded an organization that initially was called Spread the Vote. Mm-hmm. And I started it after the first time Trump was elected. Mm-hmm. because that was the first presidential election that we'd had after the decimation of the part of the Voting Rights Act. I won't get into all the details, but essentially that led to the creation of voter ID laws, or the spread at least. And so we saw the impact they had in that election. And so I started an organization to help people get IDs on the ground, which wasn't being done nationally. And then we realized almost immediately that there is a much bigger ID problem than we were aware of. It was 21 million when I started the org, now 26 million American adults who don't have government issued photo ID. And without that, sure, they can't vote in a majority of states, and often in certain elections, even in states that don't have voter ID laws. But they also can't get jobs, housing, access to benefits. You need an ID to escape poverty, to escape homelessness, to restart your life after incarceration, for so many things. And we have 11% of the adult population who don't have that, and they're really difficult to get. And so we built a second arm of the organization called Project ID. And so what we did was help people around the country get IDs individually. We also built out frameworks and trained organizations and agencies on how to get IDs and things like that. And then during elections, we built out a lot of programming to help the groups that we were working with, folks who are unhoused, folks who are currently or formerly incarcerated, et cetera, get to the polls. And then the voting side of that, Spread the Vote, was just acquired by the National Civic League in March, which is why I say I'm in this big transition.
Who am I?
Changing things with Project ID. And then, so I started those. And then in 2020, we started our C4, the Project ID Action Fund. And through that introduced a bill to Congress, which would solve this problem, and started working sort of in the political arm. And so for me, and then my book, American Identity Crisis, is about this whole ID issue. And so it's really become one of the real driving forces of my life is we've got to get every single American an ID, and then that will lead us on the path to ending homelessness, to alleviating poverty, to reducing recidivism, all of the other issues that are compounded because of it.
Yeah. It is fascinating how in many cases there's this one linchpin of something that solves so many other things, or that is deeply connected to so many other things, like ID being one of them. A year ago, a family member of mine was coming to visit, an older family member. And that's when the whole real ID thing was like in a full throttle. And it was like, oh no, can you travel? Like literally had to delay their trip for a year out of fear of, if I get to the airport, then what will happen? Yeah. But I even think about this in the same vein as zip codes, right? How I have a friend who wrote a book about your zip code story, how if you really look at the data, your zip code can really dictate so much, what you get access to, what you don't get access to. But like it's this one either data point or one item that impacts so many other things. And it feels like an ID definitely is one of those things: homelessness, access to homes or access to jobs, et cetera. So it really is interesting work.
It is. Well, and it's a function. I mean, it's, the zip code thing is because we are segregated by socioeconomic status beyond anything else. And it's a similar thing with IDs, right? There are not wealthy people who do not have access to IDs. It is all people who are low or no income because they can't have a job without an ID, and who do not have family who can help them access that. And then that also plays into voting. 99% of the 1% vote. And, it's directly proportional. Voter turnout is directly proportional to your socioeconomic status. Yeah. So it starts at 99% for the 1% and then scales down from there. So we know by how much you make, whether like the exact percentage of your likelihood of voting. And so that is another thing that's sort of compounded on the same people who were born in the wrong zip codes and don't have the money to have someone help them get a birth certificate and ID, and then it just compounds from there.
Yeah, just a domino effect.
Yep.
Yeah. This part of the conversation right here reminds me of the conversation, the last person that sat in this chair. And the part of our dialogue where we were talking about how a part of her work, it's actually Kaylin Martin, and she works in the philanthropic space. So much of her work is advocating for the resources of other organizations that she found that in that she had lost her own voice a little bit. Like she took on the voice and identity of these orgs, and she loved the work, but it was like, but this is the work that I do. It is not necessarily who I am. And that mindset sort of kind of leads me to this next question for you, because I know that you've worked in spaces where the stakes are incredibly high, like voting, IDs, it's a high stakes space. voting rights, system change. I want to know, how do you learn to trust your own voice, the voice that you have, the voice that you want to have, instead of adapting your message to others, just what people may want to hear? Like, how have you learned to navigate that world for yourself?
I had a mother who very specifically raised me to never be able to work in corporate America. My mother used to always tell me the story of Marian Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
And well, for anyone watching, if you don't know, go Google it and come back. But she was an extraordinary singer, and she wanted to give a concert at Constitution Hall, and the Daughters of the American Revolution wouldn't allow her to. And so, because she was Black. And so she instead gave a concert at the Lincoln Memorial that up to that time was the largest outdoor gathering in the country. It was this historic thing. It was in global headlines. It was a massive success. And my mother would tell me that story and then say, if people aren't listening to you, just go somewhere higher and shout until they have to hear you, which is horrible advice for anyone you want to be able to work in like any company. But it's very good advice if you're trying to raise a child to grow up to always know that their voice matters. And it comes into, I'm on the board of Amnesty International, and that's where I'm coming from. We just had a board meeting in New York, and we're dealing with really critical human rights issues all of the time that are both domestic and international. There's a lot that we have to deal with, and we have these, multi-day board meetings, and there's just a lot of people sitting around at a table, and I am generally I'm in the bottom quarter of age, and I'm the only Black woman on the board, and and I'm always having to speak up, and talking to some of the other board members who say like, "Oh, you're so brave." I'm like, "No, you're a member of this board.
This is what we're here for.
And you have to speak up."
Yeah.
And also, it's a human rights organization. Like, we're the ones who speak up. And it's not about courage. You have to have timing and discretion and all of these other things, but you do need to feel like your voice matters. And that has never been a problem because I was very much raised. And I think there are a lot of reasons that Black women overrepresent for our population, but one of them is that we were raised with the examples of Marian Anderson and Fannie Lou Hamer and all of these women who spoke up, which is why we have a bad reputation, but it's because women from many other demographic backgrounds are usually taught to be demure, and we are very much not.
Yeah.
So I find that just culturally, I don't come from quiet women. I come from Black women.
Let me dig for a second here, just a little bit. A lot of our audience, clearly by the nature of the name of the podcast, Just Start, Get Visible. They're coming here for resources, inspiration to just start the things that they want to start and get visible in a way that feels right for them. Yeah. And at some point on this journey, they're like, you know what? I got to start being visible, which often means using your voice. I mean, it could be writing, it could be other things, but a lot of times it's like, I have to actually formulate some words and say the thing. Has there ever been a time throughout your journey? And I actually don't know. I thought I was going to know the answer to this after you answered the last question. But knowing that you have been in transition, knowing that you're sort of kind of in transition right now, has there ever been a time, or is that time now, where you are trying to find your voice, find your next voice? Have you ever been in transition, or you're like, no, because of how I was raised, me finding my voice has never been a question?
I mean, yes and no, right? Like, I've always been a person who will just walk into a room and say whatever. There was a long period when I was much younger of learning how to do that effectively and how to do that strategically. Knowing, often using your voice in the strongest way possible means choosing when you're not using it. Yeah. What hill are you going to die on? And if you're always crying wolf, if you're always the loud Black woman complaining about things, they're not going to listen. So being strategic about, all right, you know what, this thing doesn't matter as much. And then also, and I think you framed this very well, of figuring out, well, what is my voice at this moment? And so going through different career transitions and knowing, I may know who I am or what I believe in, but I've been in several different fields and have left a field and thought, okay, what's next? Yeah. So even I lived here in DC for 5 years and then moved to Los Angeles. And I had like a year when I didn't know what I was doing. I'd run a nonprofit here and some other things. And And I was just sort of doing legal work and trying to figure out what was next. And I had no idea what was going to be next. I had no idea if there was going to be anything next or if I was just going to like flounder and fail. LA will eat you alive. And I was like, I could just be destroyed here. And I didn't really know what my work was going to be, what my field was going to be, where I was going to use my voice or how. And then the election happened and I started the organization and things sort of took off. And now, a decade later, that's my story. Yeah. But that was a year of really, I realize now it was a needed sabbatical before starting this thing that took over my life. But when you're in the middle of that, it feels like you're lost.
Yeah.
And, and knowing, I know I have so much to give and I've been successful in the past and also being somewhere new. Like had I stayed here and I would have had my network and still gone to the events and this and that, but I was in this brand new city and didn't know what to do. And I think that those periods I now know are very useful, but they're hard when you're going through them. And they're hard when you're going through them the first few times. Like now I'm loving it. I'd want to do nothing. I want to golf and sew and watch TV because I know there will be things next and I'm not worried about it. But early on, it's really scary.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what you just said a second ago about you feel lost, I would argue that perhaps you were a little lost, right? I mean, you can be lost in your journey. And I don't quite want to say, and it's okay, because I don't think that that's necessarily consoling to people who are in the spirit of being lost. But there is this level of action, right? Which actually leads me to my next question for you, just about a big theme that we really lean into here, a big theme that we really commit to here is taking action. It's a theme that shows up a lot, right? It's a theme that I believe strongly in. That's the reason why the freaking trademarks are on the wall of Just Start. Like I believe strongly in it. I'm curious about your willingness, your past willingness to start before feeling completely ready to do something. Yeah. Like, are you the person that has historically started things not really knowing? Like, you're like, okay, I got 30%. I don't know about the other 70%. Or are you no, it's got to be buttoned up before we're rolling? Tell me your experience with that.
Oh, no. If you want things to be perfect, you'll never get them started. So I was fortunate to come up in the startup days when the lean startup was very big. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's an excellent book that I think is useful for anyone in any field. But the idea that he posits is that you should just create your MVP, your minimum viable product, get it out into the world, and then adapt as you go. I read just recently an article that was comparing Elizabeth Holmes and Mark Zuckerberg. And how Mark Zuckerberg, and not morally or ethically or anything else, but because they're both, I don't know, they both are in prison or should be. That, Mark Zuckerberg created this like crappy website, threw it out there, and then adapted it with people's voices and this and that, whatever, and built it. Whereas Elizabeth Holmes took this thing and held onto it tightly and spent years and years and years and so much money and never put it out in public. And so it never got any review or anything. And we know now, that it's because it was an empty box. But, it also just was something, people do this. They create business plans or businesses and they spend 10 years on it. And then by the time you get it out there, you realize nobody needs this or wants it, or someone did it 8 years ago. And you can't you're never going to get it perfect. When I started Spread the Vote, I told my team, we're going to, we spent probably 3 or 4 months doing a ton of research, figuring out what's happening, what's not, what makes the most sense, what are the laws, all the basics. And we put together our first iteration of a plan. And I told everyone, this is version 1.0 of what will probably be version 22.0. But we've got to get it out there. And thank God we did, because we went out into the streets and the first thing everyone said was, this is not the thing we need. This is not the thing that will serve us. Here's what we need. Right. And so we had to go back to the drawing board and go back to the drawing board and go back to the drawing board. But if I had spent 3 years putting together the perfect voter ID plan, and then I would have gone out there and everyone would have said, well, I don't need a voter ID. I need an ID so I can get food and a place to live. Yeah. Well, that 3 years would have been out the window. Yeah. So you can't, and it's so difficult because it is so much easier to leap when you are not risking as much.
Mm-hmm.
And women of color and people from disadvantaged backgrounds are risking so much more that it is in our nature to try to make things more perfect.
To hold it.
We also get less funding.
Yeah.
You know, Black women in philanthropy, we get 0.03% of foundation funding, and I think it's 0.02% of VC funding and all these things. So it is really difficult, but you can start small and still get out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we have to teach people, you know, these examples of I'm quitting my job and dropping out of college and going into a garage and starting Amazon. Well, unless, like Jeff Bezos, your parents give you a check for several $100,000, maybe to start an Etsy shop on the side, right? But you cannot wait until it's perfect, because it never will be.
It never will be. Or maybe it even looks like joining a community, like whatever community looks like for you. Like for you, it was your team. I was just talking to a friend a few weeks ago who was telling me that she had this idea and she was nervous about sharing this idea with somebody else because she was like, oh, what if they steal it? And I was like, you know, I hear you. I hear you and I see you and I respect this fear that you have. But from many decades in business, myself, what I'll tell you is that you can share this idea all over the place because the magic is in the execution. I mean, it honestly is a proof point of even why like AI has its place, but I can pull up the nicest, shiniest plan of whatever on AI. And still, if it's not executed, then it doesn't matter, you know? And so it is constantly pounding the pavement with telling people in our Just Start community and people that are around you, so many of your questions get answered in the action.
Well, and not just that. I mean, I always tell people Friendster was first, but Facebook did it better, right? You know, and with me...
And I never even actually experienced Friendster.
I barely remember it.
Was it in between like Black Planet?
I was just a little baby.
Like what?
I was an infant. I'm so young. I'm just a little ingenue. I don't know.
I don't even know.
It was very early. It was like in between MySpace and Facebook, but it was early and it was terrible. And then Facebook
Friendster.
came out.
The name is upsetting me, actually.
It's a terrible name. But you know, like when I started Spread the Vote, it's funny. I have this actually framed in gold on my wall. I sent out a tweet back when we had Twitter, and I just said, hey, I'm thinking about maybe helping people get IDs. Does anyone want to help? And then I spent the next 3 weeks on the phone with volunteers. And I put together a team. And I had people who helped build the tech for free and do the research for free and who helped fundraise and who, I mean, so we were just acquired. We're around for a little more than 9 years. And some of my staff, actually, well, most of my staff has been with me since early, but some of my staff were those initial volunteers. And one of the staff members who now, as part of the acquisition, is working at the Civic League, she was one of my very first volunteers who responded to that tweet. And they were with me through everything, this whole thing. If I had tried to build that on my own, it never would have happened. But I put out a tweet and said, I think I'm going to do this thing. And then I got this incredible group of people, and some were around for a really long time, some were around for a few weeks or whatever. But you have to be willing to put it out there. And I know I get people all the time like, well, maybe she wants to sign an NDA or this or that. It's like, look, you're either going to build this thing or not. First of all, 99.9% of the people have their own lives and jobs and things. And even if they wanted to steal this, can't. They have their own ideas.
Right.
And if there's one other person who wants to steal it, great. Either work with them because you need a friend or just do it better.
Absolutely. Or, you know, you'll be in competition. And who says competition is so bad?
Competition is needed.
Absolutely. Yeah. The whole notion of community, I talk about it so much now because sometimes we hit walls or we're not inspired. I am not, as much as people think that I wake up in this great magical mood every day, I don't, right? And I know the people that I can call to say like, look, I'm not with it today, right? I just need somebody to just hype me up. Like community is so important. And it's even fascinating, even us technically, even though this is our first face-to-face encounter, we're here with each other because of a community that we share, which is Royal Society of the Arts, right? And somebody said, hey, you should probably talk to Kat Calvin. And so listen, Just Start community. We talk about this all the time. You have community. It could be 1 people, it could be 1,000 people. My question and my challenge to you is, when is the last time that you reached out to the people that you call community for support, for accountability, and to get what you need to get from where you are to where you want to be? Kat, I want to talk a little bit about being misunderstood. And I actually love talking with you about this because you over-index on the almost like, I don't really care what y'all talking about. Like, I'm going to say what I want to say, right? But I always like to give people a catalog of things to choose from in the question like this, because some people aren't going to over-index over there with you, but at least they know that's how she does it. So how can I do it? Yeah. So many people hold back on starting, getting visible, moving to their next step because they're afraid of being misunderstood or rejected, right? Which, rejection hurts, but you can get past it. Was there a moment when you realized that being authentic, finding your voice, using your voice was more important than being universally accepted?
I think one of the benefits of growing up Black and female is you learn from day one you're not going to be universally accepted. We don't have the option of trying to be liked by everybody. Mm-hmm. Half the people in any room we walk into already don't like us. So I think that for me, that's never been a thing. Mm-hmm. I also had the benefit, and I say this, I always have to caveat, it was before the internet. Mm-hmm. I had the benefit of having been bullied as a child.
You were bullied?
Yes.
Okay.
Constantly. We were in Army brats. I was always new and I was very nerdy. But I learned really early on, people are just not going to like you and they're going to be horrible about it. Mm-hmm. And you can still get all A's. Like, you can still just have a great life. And so that's never been a thing. I think that, though, there's also, there's so many people who I meet or I counsel or mentor who have not had the benefit of either having family who understand where they're coming from. I come from a very long line of well-educated Black women. So like for me, it was like, well, yeah, obviously you're going to college, but I also know and have worked with a lot of women who were first generation, and that's really groundbreaking and that's very scary. I was talking once to this guy who grew up the same time I did, but in New England, and I grew up in Seattle, where we had Microsoft and Amazon and Boeing and Starbucks and the whole 90s.com boom. We growing up in Seattle, we thought everybody was an entrepreneur. We thought that the normal career path was starting a business in your garage because that's what everybody did. And then you'd go on a trip to the Seattle Art Museum and those names would be on the wall. And we were like, yeah, you go to your garage and you start a business and then you become rich, and then you give money to the art museum. Isn't that what everybody does? And so the idea of entrepreneurship was never scary to me.
Yeah.
Because it seemed normal. And then I was talking to this guy who grew up in New England. He was like, I never even heard the word entrepreneur until college.
And for some people, it wasn't the word entrepreneur. Like I knew people in my neighborhood growing up that started a business. But as a kid, I was like, I never heard the word entrepreneur. No. I never actually experienced an avocado either as a kid either. Did you have avocados as a kid?
Yeah.
Girl, no.
Well, my family's from Arizona, so I knew guacamole very early.
Yeah, no. I don't think I experienced an avocado until I was like over 18, which I'm like, I know.
That's the saddest thing I've ever heard.
I have a stack of avocado upstairs right now, probably close to rotten, because they rot.
You got to talk to your therapist about that childhood trauma. That's deep trauma.
I'm making up for it. I'm buying it in droves. I'm buying avocados by the boatloads now.
God, you're just Costco-ing your avocados. Because we also... the way that we categorize startups versus small businesses and who's glamorous and who's not and et cetera is a whole other thing.
It is.
But I think that, one thing that is so important and that I just tell everyone is you could be coming from all sorts of backgrounds where the thing you're trying to do feels weird or crazy or people make fun of you. And you need to understand, first of all, you're absolutely going to be rejected all of the time and fail. Get over it.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen. I got rejected for something today. I'm always getting rejected. It's just a fact of life. And it's really important that you understand that nothing is ever about you. And when those people are telling you that you're crazy, it's because they're terrified because you're doing something they wish they could do. And you just have to, and that's another thing that gets so much easier. The older you get, the more you realize whatever is happening right here is not about you.
Yeah, it's not about
It's never about you. The world does not care enough about you for anything to be about you. It is all about not having had avocados as a child, and that's why they are the way they are now.
And I'm so depressed. Tore up about it. But I say to young people that we teach etiquette and leadership to all the time, you're special. But you're not that special.
Right.
Yes, there are some things that are about you and I care about your feelings and I want you to be successful. But there's very few unique experiences that we have that are just like, that's just you. Like that person probably has a whole bunch of other stuff that they're carrying into that conversation or whatnot. I want to jump somewhere that I didn't know if I would ask you this question, but we're here. So let's roll. Okay. And it's a bit about your next, particularly in the space of where the discomfort is for you right now and thinking about that. You probably talk to so many women in particular that are in transition right now, either by force or by choice. and are trying to navigate that.
Yeah.
And there is some level of discomfort in the transition because you've been through the transition, almost because it feels like you crave the transition a little bit too, like, or change or something else. I am curious about where there might be discomfort sitting for you right now and how you're navigating that.
Yeah, it's interesting being at this point in my life because I am so fortunate. It's funny because when you're young and they say like you're going to be broke in your 20s and it's going to be great, you're not having any idea. And then you're going to work your butt off in your 30s and then everything is going to be cool in your 40s. And you think that's a lie. And then you get into your 40s, you're like, oh yeah, everything's great.
What? They were telling the truth.
I own a house. I've got a mortgage. Like, things are fine. And so it's so different now. And I think for me right now, I am in a place where I don't know what's next. Mostly because I don't want to know, because I'm just not in a hurry.
Okay.
And I feel very comfortable with just sort of waiting, and knowing like, I needed several months post-acquisition just to, running a nonprofit is a nightmare. Don't do it. And I spent 9 years having to worry about, no, honestly.
Come on now, we have to pro-con this because somebody out there is mid starting a nonprofit.
Stop.
No, Kat!
Stop. People don't realize, first of all, you're running a corporation, like a legal corporation when you're running a nonprofit. It's not all sunshine and roses. It's mostly audits and insurance and legal paperwork.
And boards, depending on how you're structured.
And you have to have a board, and they're almost never going to be great. And you're fundraising and all these things. But also, I spent 9 years having to worry about payroll every single week.
Yeah.
Even when I was on vacation, no matter what I was doing, I have no children, and yet I had so many children who every week I had to make sure that they had a roof over their heads and food, and it's terrifying. And I took a cortisol test a few years ago, and it was so off the charts that my doctor freaked out and was like, we have to address this. They made me stop working out for a year because it was really bad. And it was interesting because when the acquisition went through, there was a 6-week period when I could feel my body physically having to adjust to not having that stress anymore.
It was like a part of your norm at
that
point.
Was. And I know I want to take a cortisol test in a few months because I know that they've dropped it. Literally, I would be sitting in a chair and feeling my body having to readjust because I didn't have that stress. And that was a really good indication of how stressful my life had been. But also I'm very, very fortunate that I don't have to sort of panic and go find something else. And I know physically I need time to adjust. And I'm also, still running things and still on boards and working on a project with some friends to try to get philanthropic money to grassroots movements and whatever. So also when I'm resting, I still have 8 jobs.
You're not resting. You're doing less than normal.
Right, exactly. Instead of 12 jobs, I have 10. But for me, I'm now in a space where I don't have to feel discomfort. Yeah. It's more, I'm very excited because I know that I can do anything. And it's all right, maybe I want to go to be a lawyer, or maybe I want to do this, or maybe I want to do that, or whatever. And I think there's a lot of curiosity.
Yeah.
I think when I think about where my body is, I feel a lot of I wonder what it's going to be. I wonder at 50 what I'm going to have done. And I'm not in a hurry, but I'm curious to find out.
You're channeling this into almost like an adventure.
Well, yeah. And so it's interesting because when you were talking about it's okay to be lost, I always tell people, have your girls read sci-fi and fantasy when they're little. First of all, because often the heroes are little girls. Yeah. So I always grew up with literature where I was little girls can do anything because they're all fighting, monsters with swords in my books. But also, the one thing you learn is in every adventure you get lost. Yeah. There's no adventure story in which there isn't a period in which you get lost. Sometimes it's an entire second movie of a trilogy that didn't necessarily need to be a movie, right? That's part of the process. And I love adventures. I love traveling by myself to places where I don't know anything or anybody or whatever. It's really exciting. But I can be excited about it now because I don't have to be afraid because I'm at a point in my life where I have some amount of comfort, which was the difference between 10 years ago when I was here.
Yeah. It's your own version of privilege.
Right. Yeah. No, I have so many layers of privilege. It's ridiculous. And when I was, 30 or however old I was when I was here last time, I didn't have that. And I was like, there is a chance I can't pay my rent in 6 months. I don't know what I'm doing, right? Or, I'll just be doing terrible, boring legal work forever and I'll die alone and nobody will remember my name, right?
I'm so happy you're past that.
But you need those periods. Yeah. So I think, it's funny because right now, particularly, Black women have been hit by unemployment harder in this period than anybody else. And I'm on the board of the Loveland Foundation, which I love. We pay for therapy for Black women. So if you need it, you could go to the Loveland Foundation website and sign up. We give vouchers. It's amazing, but we've seen unbelievable need because we're getting hit more than anyone. And I think last year we got therapy requests from, I think it was like 75% of the unemployed Black women in America. Like, it was crazy. And so I work with and talk to a lot of people who are in transition, not voluntarily.
Yeah.
We also are seeing a record number of nonprofits fail because philanthropy has really shut down in the last year. And so I'm constantly talking to people who are in these transitional phases and who it's really scary. And the one thing I always say is take care of your basics first. Like, just get whatever job. Don't worry about your ego. Don't worry about how it looks on your resume. Do what you have to do to just have your basics taken care of. And once you're there, then you can start thinking about, well, what's my next venture? Or how am I going to move up the ladder? But a lot of times people, and it's because of just how capitalism works, we're so busy thinking about, well, I don't want to have this thing on my resume, or whatever, because I want to move up and this and that. And it's like,
and it doesn't have to be, actually. You don't have to put it on your resume, by the way.
First of all, you don't have to put it on your resume. Second of all, nobody goes in a straight line.
Right.
The days of working at one company for 50 years and getting a pension are over anyways. But, but people freak themselves out so much that they don't look at opportunities that are just like the opportunities they can get. I was just counseling someone who is applying for this incredibly high level job that I know for a fact they're not getting because I work with the organization that's hiring. But that organization has a job that is lower level but great salary. They could get it. They could be very secure while they build up. But they're so set on the title and the salary that they refuse to look at the thing that's realistic. Yeah. And that's really damaging.
It is.
You really have to just think, how am I paying my rent and eating 3 square meals a day? Let me get there. Even if it feels like I've gone down. I've done some like ridiculously terrible jobs at points when I should have been doing more. But I had to eat. Yeah. And then I got myself out. But you have to let your ego die.
A part of it is ego. I mean, it's not just ego. It's also a bit of the reality of where we're at in the world. And this isn't a claim to settle or ask for less than what you're worth. Like, this isn't the path I'm trying to go down. But I think there's such an opportunity to look at your desired catalog of skills and experiences and find ways to tick those things off the list versus saying, like, I've got to be a senior, blah, 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 blah. Like, I think about this the same way I think about bed and breakfast. I have an aspiration to own a bed and breakfast.
I love it.
And to my knowledge, right, unless somebody knows otherwise, there is no bed and breakfast school. Like, literally, it needs to be, you learn a little bit about zoning, a little bit about hospitality. And so I've been on this journey of coming up with this makeshift curriculum for me of learn a little of this, a little of that. And I tell people who are feeling stuck or feeling like, I want to do something, but I don't know what else it is. What is the catalog of things, skills that you want to acquire? Yep. And what are the jobs, stops, projects that you can commit to check that off the list on the journey, right? Yep. Because you can get skills and experiences in a million different ways. It doesn't just have to be that senior blah, blah, blah position that pays you $150,000 thinking that the money's going to make you happen when, surprise, the money doesn't make you happy, by the way. Money is a resource, but it doesn't always make you happy. I really want to get straight to the people who are still listening. So thank you for still listening. If you're still here, who are like, yes, yes, yes. However, I would love some straight up direct advice. And I have to frame it up like this. Like, I know that there are many people who have something to say. They're ready to find their voice. They're ready to get visible in a way that feels right for them. There's a cause they care about. There's a dream that they feel very strongly about, and they want to pursue something or start, but they're waiting for permission. Okay? Like, I know tons of people that come to me after I speak somewhere and will say, I've done this, 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 and this. And they pretty much are asking me for permission to do it. And I'm like, you're waiting for permission that you don't need. However, here's the permission, right? What do you say to people that are legit waiting for permission that they absolutely don't need to start the thing, kick off the dream, right?
Yeah.
What's your perspective on that? Other than like, go talk to my elders who says, screw that, get started.
I mean, it's so funny because it is so opposite from how I operate.
Yeah.
And I speak to people like this all the time, and even now, but especially when I was younger, I was always just like, I don't get it, just do it. And like, I never understood the whole thing about like being afraid of success and things like that. I'd be like, I understand now. And I think there's so many of the factors that we've talked about already that lead to that. One of the things that I tell people is find a biography of someone who is living the kind of life, and it doesn't have to be, it could be the biography of Madeleine Albright, and you don't want to be Secretary of State, right? But of someone who you can read their biography, because what you will see is none of them waited for anybody. And all of them, their lives went in a million different trajectories. Like, nobody ever wrote an autobiography in which they were like, one day I was born and everything was perfect, and then the next day I was CEO.
And voila.
Here I am, right? I said, like, read, I love Diane von Furstenberg's autobiography, or Cleopatra, a book about, anybody, because it's so important for you to understand that you are actually normal. And I think we see people, and we have this problem with social media now. It's always existed in some way, in which we look at other people's lives and we think, everything must be easier for them and going better for them than it is for me. Yeah. Instead of recognizing, no, everybody is in the same place you are.
You're not that special.
Or was at some point. Yeah. Right. And, the difference, I don't love the saying, you have to see it to be it. Because I think all of the best people did things no one's ever done before. Yeah. Like, those were always my heroes growing up. But I do think that you need to know that it's possible to do something extraordinary. Yeah. Like, just watching Mae Jemison become the first Black woman in space. I mean, do I want to go to space? Obviously, yes, more than anything. But also,
is it true? Oh, God. Like, more than anything? Sorry.
If I become a billionaire tomorrow, first thing I'm doing is building a spaceship. I'm not helping a single child building a spaceship. I want to go to space so bad. If NASA called tomorrow and said, you could go in a spaceship today all by yourself, you'll never come back to Earth, sign me up. Sign me up. Can I have all the books? I want to go to space more than anything.
Okay, this is totally taking a turn, but we got to hit this. I feel like it's so short-sighted for me to say why. Like, I feel like, Jacqueline, there must be a much more inspirational question in there. Come on.
So cool.
It is cool. I think I'm wondering, okay, let me make a much more eloquent question here, because, I can do this. Kat, can you enlighten us on what the 3 things you're most looking forward to in a space exploration in which you will never return to Earth?
I mean, it's just, space is so cool. You get to leave your planet. Who's cooler than an astronaut? And be among the stars?
Okay, that's just one reason. Give me 2 more.
It's all the reasons. It's just, I mean, sure, NASA contributes so much to our everyday lives, and most of the things we have, like most of the things in this room, are because of NASA. There's all of these great reasons, but mostly it's just because space is awesome.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not awesome. I think I just didn't see this coming. That's all. You just hit me with the hook here.
But also, I was a little girl in the 90s when Sally Ride and Mae Jemison went to space.
I remember Mae Jemison very clearly.
So, that was also such a big deal.
It was.
That as a little girl, it was like, that's amazing. And then I grew, and I love, Star Trek and sci-fi and whatever, and like grew up watching Nichelle Nichols and whatever. So I just, like, growing up during the space shuttle era, or even if it was the tail end of it, like, it's just cool. I just want to go. But my point is, I don't think that you need to see someone be a doctor to know that you can be a doctor. I do think, however, that you need to see, there are people who are doing amazing, groundbreaking things, so I can too, right? It is important. I think this is one place where television and social media have been really beneficial, because they have opened up worlds of possibility to children who may not have seen them before. So there's a woman who ran for governor in Georgia against Stacey Abrams. Her name is also Stacey, and I think it's Stacey Evans. Her last name left me. But she had the most extraordinary opening campaign ad that I've ever seen. And it was called like 19 Houses or something. And it was all about how she and her mother grew up constantly moving. And her mother was in these series of very abusive relationships, and they would move from house to house to house. But that on TV, she would watch legal shows, and she would see these women become, who were lawyers on television. Mm-hmm. And she realized she wanted to do that. And then she got the Georgia Hope Scholarship, and she went to law school, and she became a lawyer. And that, for me, it's like, that's what, it's about opening a world and realizing, oh, I can do something incredible. Yeah. And if you, like so many people, grow up in environments where the thing you want to do seems ridiculous to the people around you, or you've never seen someone do it, read books about people who have done amazing things. You know, I wanted to be Maria Tallchief when I was a little girl. She was the first Native American prima ballerina. She was incredible. Did I think that I was going to be a ballerina? I did. And then I kept twisting my ankle, and there went that dream. But also, I just knew, oh, there's this Cherokee woman who did this amazing thing in this world that no one thought she belonged in. I can do anything in any world too. And I think that so much of it is exposing people. You know, when you talk about wanting to start a bed and breakfast, and so you're researching this and that and whatever, that is because you know that you need to know all these things. But I'm constantly talking to people who, you know, want to start, this actually happened once, a fashion startup, and had never read Vogue, right? Hadn't done a lot of the basic research. And not because they are unintelligent or anything else, but because they've never met anyone who started a startup. They don't know what they're supposed to do. There's no instruction manual for most of these things. And so I have to start with, all right, well, square one, you got to do your research. Let me tell you what market research is, and start there. And then you're going to learn about, you know, Leon Talley. You're gonna learn about stories and read, oh, this person did this. Oh, I should learn what that is, and blah, 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 blah. But you have to take in as much information as possible. And once you do that, then you're not going to ask permission, because you're going to be like, oh, Catherine the Great didn't ask permission.
Right. And didn't have all the answers.
No.
The one word that...
Famously.
Yeah, right. The one word that surfaces as I think about you talk about space, even, as I hear you talk about sci-fi, as I even hear you talking about your elders, I hear the word possible. And there's something about you believing in possibilities that you don't even know are possibilities, right? When I get frustrated, you know what my go-to line is these days? This is all made up. I mean, for real, like so much of what we do,
it is.
You know, no one came and said, Jacqueline, like you have permission to start this podcast. Like, no, I made it up. Right? I own an etiquette company. Why? Because I made it up. You make up stuff, and you're not making it up unethically, hopefully, right? You're just like, yo.
But it's just, the economy is made up. Everything's made up.
It's all made up.
Thought of it.
It's all made up, right?
We just thought of it one day and did it.
Yeah.
And now it's a thing.
And it is. And so the word possible just came to mind for me, like just believing that things are possible that you know about and that you don't know about.
And it's again, where you just need to surround yourself with data and information about the impossible possible things that people did. My mother went to Mount Holyoke, and I did too, but part of her brainwashing me as a child was really dumping Mount Holyoke information on me, so I had no choice. But she would talk about Mary Lyon, who founded Mount Holyoke and Wellesley. She was a real pioneer in women's education. And she would go around and to convince parents to send their daughters to college, she would tell them, well, by learning math and science, they're going to be much better cooks and housekeepers when they're wives. And then the parents would say, oh, okay. And then she'd get them to college, and she'd say, forget all that. And the motto of the school was, go where no one has gone and do what no one has done. But that was, you know, and I would learn stories about how she would go around, you know, fundraising with a little velvet bag. But like that was such an early memory and lesson for me of, oh, she wanted to get women to college, and she had to lie to their parents because it was the right thing to do, and then get them there and say, no, forget that. You're going to be pioneers. And it's like, oh, well, we can do anything. But it's you have to know. And I was shocked when I was in my 20s or 30s, and I learned that not all women were raised with these stories.
No.
Like, not all women had storybooks called feminist fairy tales.
No, I actually did not have a feminist fairy tale book in my ether.
Yeah, no, I did. I swear Gloria Steinem were like my first words. But and then I was like, oh, this actually explains a lot.
Yeah.
And even now I talk to friends who don't know still these stories of amazing women who did things. And so they don't understand that they can.
Yeah.
They don't understand that they have options. We're in this moment right now that I think is wonderful, in which fertility rates are dropping around the world, marriage rates are dropping around the world, because women and girls are finding out, oh, I can have a career, I can wait a lot later.
Yeah.
And that is the thing I was fortunate to have been raised knowing, but so many women weren't. And they thought, well, the only choice is to get married and have kids. And so they just did it.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is, and the answer to knowing you don't need permission is, just go learn a lot about people. Just go pick up books, go pick up biographies, and just realize, oh,
yeah,
I can do anything. And then you will.
One of the autobiographies that I really enjoyed a lot, and I was just peeking back at my bookshelf to make sure I hadn't given it away, is My Life in Full by Indra Nooyi, CEO of PepsiCo, or former CEO, and just great. She's an Indian woman, and she talked a lot about culture, but just even her perspective and approach to things just unlocked this level of thinking that I didn't even realize was in there. And so I really appreciate your perspective of just go and explore other people's mental state of the things that the paths they went down, because you can shop from things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you just learn so much. I mean, again, about the fact that everyone has gone through what you're going through. Nobody just woke up and was perfect.
Right. Because you're special, but you're not that special. Right.
Right.
I have what I think is final question. I've often said I have one final question, and it's like, but there's more. Right? And it is the headline. Because as much as I was planning on asking you, what advice would you give to future generations, right? It feels like a layup, and we're not rolling with layups right now. I'm curious, particularly thinking about your voice of the future and what you're at least noodling on being next. What do you think the headline of your immediate future will be?
Well, so I can say my overwhelming life goal is to pass my bill and ensure that every single American has an ID. And I would like to die with that on my gravestone. Like, that is the thing that I was able to make happen.
Cat ID maker Calvin.
Exactly. So whenever I think about what I'm doing, there's always sort of that, but the larger sort of picture, the reason that I want everyone to have an ID, and sort of focus on, I do a lot of, and especially right now, speaking on, hey, we have to fight for our democracy and for this country, so it's really important that we remember why we love it. And it's all around, I want people to have agency. I want them to have self-respect. I want them to have pride in who they are and where they come from. I know that having an ID is very key to that and critical to that for so many reasons. But being able to wake up and look around and be like, I am very proud of where I live and where I come from and my family and the country we come from is vitally important. And it is what will either bring our democracy back or we'll lose it forever. And so for me right now, in the moment that we're in, everything that I am doing is focused on how do I ensure that people feel the pride and love that they need to fight for this country and to fight for a democracy.
Yeah, I love that for you. Kat, what I hope is that as you navigate your next headline and then headline after that and whatever next looks like for you, that you'll come back and join us for yet another conversation. Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. You've been in many meaningful spaces. You've been in, and still are a bit in the fundraising space, the social good space, voting rights space, making sure that you are navigating failed systems, like from a structural standpoint. And if no one's told you lately, like, thank you for the work that you do. You're inspiring people that have met you and people that are the recipients of the good work that you do. And we're grateful here on the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. All right, listen, you made it to yet the end of another Just Start Get Visible episode. It's been a pleasure having you here, and of course it's been a pleasure having Kat Calvin as well. Wherever you're at in the world, I hope that you're safe, I hope that you're healthy, and I hope that you're well, and I certainly hope that you're giving yourself permission to start the things that you want to do. You know the drill, don't be a stranger. If there's ever a subject that you'd like for us to cover, or maybe even a guest that you think is curious and you know, I would respect and love to have them here in my safe space, just send me an email. We don't make it difficult. email to info@jacquelinebaker.com. So I thank you for spending some time with us. We look forward to seeing you again real soon. You take care of yourself and ciao.